This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening. Welcome to the Easthampton City Council meeting for Wednesday, December 7th. The meeting tonight is being recorded and broadcast by Easthampton Media on Charter Channel 193 and live streaming on their e-media website. All councilors are participating in this meeting are gathering hybrid on the executive order by Governor Baker extended to March 2023, which allow us to do so. And remind both the member of the City Council and the public to remain mute until recognized by the City Council President. Also, for the members of the public, please remove your camera for the duration of the meeting unless you are participating in public speak time or the public hearing. Thank you. This meeting is now called to order. Barbara.
Connie Denham. Here. Salem Derby.
Present.
Omar Gomez.
Here.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Here.
Dave Munier.
Here.
Tom Peak.
Here.
Brad Riley.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Owen Zarrett.
Here.
Please stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I will take the motions for the meetings of November 2nd and November 16th, I just want to apologize for the public. The system is making a noise, and we don't know what it is. If you hear it, the whole meeting doing a sound, we don't know what it is. I just want to apologize. Now we'll take a motion to approve the minutes for November 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting, the minutes for the meeting of November 2nd, 2022. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
I think we'll lose Tom.
Tom is frozen.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Motion passes. I will take a motion for November 16, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the meeting of November 16, 2022. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
J.P. Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
He's still frozen. Yes.
Okay. Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zarrett.
Aye.
Oh, and Connie Denham, sorry. Aye. I was like, did I say?
Motion passes.
I'll text Tom.
Public speak time. Is anyone here that want to participate in the public speak time? You're going to have 3 minutes to address anything you want to the council. We have a public hearing about a few ordinance review. I will ask to please be respectful to the council, respectful to the people, and as soon as you go to the podium, please state your name and address. We are not discussing anything about the CPC or now the new language of the person. No, we are talking about, let me see, the safe and fair access to legal productive and gender affirming. We are not talking anything about that tonight because the ordinance committee didn't see that yet. But besides that, you are welcome to say whatever you want to the council.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Denise Ducharme. I'm a senior residing at Cliffview here in town. I'm here to state I've been elected as the president for the new LTO, which we're forming. Deb Dominguez is our elected vice president. We're looking forward to working with our residents and the city in the town. We've accomplished a lot, actually, because we had a bit of a downtime with our voting due to some facts that the executive director, Deb Walker, sent out to the residents in our community, which we took assault to. But we got through it. We did our voting, thanks to some city councilor members that helped us. We have tried to contact the DHCD with a lot of concerns from the residents and the tenants in these communities. The DHCD has referred us back to the Board of Directors. Some of the Board of Directors are supportive of what the tenants feel that's been going on for years with some of the harassment and elder abuse. The next step, I think, for us, after we get recognized by the city, also we need to get recognized by Boston, is we're looking to have the support of the Center for Public Representation. They have done class action suits before. There's a lot of people in town that are fed up with what's gone on. They have a lot of grievances. So grievances. We hope we don't have to file for a class action suit, but I think that Ms. Walker, the executive director, does need to be called on the carpet about what has been done to our communities. It's up to you. I know the board of directors have the hiring and firing power. We would like to see someone with a human services background to work with all of us in the city. So we would like to be able to have cornhole games, which we were told we can't. To put a Christmas tree in our community room, which we recently were told we could not. So just a few little things. Thank you for your time. We look forward to working with everybody in the city, with the local tenants organization, and hopefully that all of our tenants now know they have a voice with the local tenants organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Deb Friedman. I live at 9 Chapman Avenue. And I just want to make a very brief statement in support of the proposed resolution that you'll be discussing later to endorse passage of the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, which I know is H.R. 40 in Congress. I hope the resolution goes through, and assuming it does, I hope the council will make the resolution of the city council known publicly beyond just including it in the city council meeting, minutes, rather. And any publication of the resolution should be accompanied by an explanation of the need for and the importance of reparations. I thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Julie?
Hi, Julie from Precinct 1. I just, a couple of meetings back, I had asked for the City Council to revisit the gun violence resolution. I didn't see anything on the agenda, so I don't know how I can get a response to this. So if you could direct me to where I can get a response for this. As you know, lately there has been another tragic event. I don't think your silence is helping the issue to get resolved. And I just respectfully request an answer to my request to revisit that gun resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. You can reach me, my phone number, 413-977-2676, or my email is hgomez@easthamptonma.gov, and then we can start talking about it. Anyone else? No one else from the public? Seeing none. Communication. No, that's a noise. Yeah. Communication for elected official boards and committee. Any councilor have anything tonight for the council? Councilor Sarrett?
And just to be clear, Mr. President, this is not a response to the public. I was actually I was already planning to speak about this tonight. So we're all aware of the spate of gun violence that has occurred in this country since our last meeting. Club Q in Colorado, which I also would consider a hate crime, the shooting in Oklahoma, shootings in Virginia, and actually many in between. Unfortunately, we now live in a country where we have to have a website dedicated to tracking violent gun deaths and mass shootings, the Gun Violence Archive. It's an ongoing, sobering reminder of our country's problem with guns. Between homicides and suicides so far this year, we have 41,000 deaths to guns this year. And I know there had been a lot of discussion. I certainly take some responsibility in my lack of potentially appropriate diplomacy or collaboration in regard to our third proposed resolution. But I think we got so caught up in the language that we lost the focus on what I think, in my opinion, we absolutely do agree with, is that we 100% stand against this issue, this scourge, this ongoing epidemic in our country. And this city council has 9 people. It doesn't function without those 9 people working together. We do our best work when it's done together. And I feel that unlike certain other issues that we propose resolutions or speak to, or they're kind of one-off, ballot issues or legislation that we're looking to support, this is an ongoing problem. And I know that because it's not on the agenda, we can't really deliberate this tonight, but I feel that there could be something done within our council on some sort of term basis each term, or something just like we sign the other statement against discrimination, that we continue to call out and express our dedication and opposition to this epidemic of gun violence. And that's something I'd like to work on. I'd love to work on it with everybody here, because again, our best work is the work that we do together. And so I'd love to hear from people about ideas. I don't think we need to necessarily get in the weeds about policy, but I think that the topic itself is worthy of ongoing condemnation. And to slightly segue away from that, I also just want to address the fact that this country has seen an extraordinary amount of anti-Semitism, certainly recently in the press, but it's no secret that there has been substantial year-to-year increases in anti-Semitic acts in this country, a 34% increase in anti-Semitic acts in the last year, the highest that we've ever seen in this country since the ADL started tracking anti-Semitism in 1979. In Massachusetts in the last year, we've seen a 50% increase in acts of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism accounts for over half of the hate crimes in the United States that have been recorded by the FBI. And we all are, I think, are aware of recent statements and acts by public figures, celebrities, and ex-president sitting and having dinner with a known white supremacist. None of this is acceptable, but the lines keep getting pushed farther and farther back because we start to accept certain things as almost being like, well, that's not worthy of condemnation. It's just something that we shouldn't accept. And whereas a few years ago it was something that was absolutely unacceptable. And so again, something to think about how we as a city can work on this together. Just in transparency, I've already reached out to the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and some other Jewish groups about ways that we as a city could address this. And then lastly, on a more pleasant note, speaking of the Jewish community at large, we are having our 6th annual Chanukiah or Hanukkah menorah lighting down on the boardwalk on December 18th at 6 p.m. That's the first night of Hanukkah. This is a community event. It's for everybody. It's to find ways to find meaning in the holiday for everyone, whether you're Jewish or not. It's BYOM, bring your own menorah, and shed some more light into our community this year. I always take a lot of joy seeing all of the menorahs lit up with the Christmas tree in the background. I think it's a great tribute to how our city does so many things together and brings so many traditions together. So hopefully see you all there. And that's it, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Riley?
Can I just ask a clarifying question? What time it was?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 6 PM.
6 p.m. Okay.
I'll
thank you.
send an email out to the city as well.
That's it?
Yes, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilor? Seeing none, let me jump one, two. I know. I just want to go through mayor's communication because she's not here. So that way, I don't have to after. Mayor communication, mayor's not here. I will take a motion to open public
So
hearing.
moved. Open the public hearings.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open a public hearing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Derby?
Thank you, Mr. President. So what we have in front of us is actually a holdover from last term. This is recommendations that we got from the Ordinance Review Committee. And we were trying to figure out, since there were so many changes, we were trying to figure out how we could do these as a group because there were so many changes. And so what you'll see is that on the agenda, these are all kind of grouped together, and they're all listed on the city website, exactly what the changes are. And to go through some of them, just like some are deleting ordinances that are no longer relevant to life in Easthampton. For example, the skinny dipping ordinance is covered by state law. So having a local ordinance for that is kind of redundant. And, you know, so similar things like that. We cleaned up some of the language in some of the ordinances to take out some of the verbiage that was antique, I guess is a good way to say it, that just isn't relevant to us in modern society, like gas lamps and whatnot. So we also, and I would say this is one of the largest pieces of this, was going through the entire ordinance, you know, all the city's ordinances to look for non-gender neutral language. And what we did was we found is, as best we could, every instance of language that was specific to a gender and replaced that with non-gender specific language. And I think one of the starkest examples of that was there were many instances where they referred to the mayor as he or him. And we've only had one male mayor. So the other two mayors have been female. So it was not accurate. And it was also just you know, not appropriate. So that I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to look through all of these. And we did decide to do them all as a batch so we could kind of move these forward and not have to wait and do, I think it would be like 20 something public hearings. So I'd entertain any questions, I guess, from the council, if it pleases the president.
Yep. Thank you, Councilor Derby. Any councilor have any questions about these changes? Councilor Kuczynski?
Thank you. They're pretty thorough. I think Councilor Derby covered them quite well. I just had a question about 1.7, where ordinances are printed and posted and kept in city offices. I know the city offices aren't open after 5 or 6 o'clock on Thursday. And I know most people are very comfortable with the web and finding them online, but for those who may not, I wouldn't want to leave anyone behind. And if they had a question at that time, let's say at 6 o'clock, 6:05 on Thursday, they wouldn't be able to get into a copy of this if they didn't have access to the web necessarily, or felt comfortable using a computer to a hard copy until Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. So is it possible to leave a copy of the ordinances at the Emily Williston Library? Is that something that we might include here?
Councilor Derby, but
it looks like Councilor Peak has his hand up, so I'll let him answer that.
I didn't see a Councilor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is something that we've talked about a bit over like the course of the ordinance review process and then in ordinance. And if everyone was involved was okay with that, I think that's a great thing. But one of the things that's been relevant here is that we amend these ordinances a lot. And if we're printing out a paper copy every time we amend the ordinances, and then either switching out the relevant sections or switching out the whole thing, it's just going to be a lot of printing.
Thank you, Councilor Peak. And you do, I'll go after you. But I have a concern about bringing it to the library, because the library is just a nonprofit that is not part of, is not a city agency. And they can decide to keep the library closed too for any reason. So I think the idea is good, but I don't know how we can do something like that.
Print from the web.
Yes, and that's true. The library can print it from the web. Councilor Rist.
At our last charter review sessions, we discussed a lot about how we can use the internet and modern services of our website. All of our ordinances are available on the website. Now, I know there's plenty of people that don't have computer access, but for instance, if there's a senior that doesn't have knowledge, the senior center is available to help them with this kind of thing. And I have to agree that cutting down a tree to print one copy of our ordinances doesn't make sense to me, given modern technology. So I'm not sure it's necessary, Councilor Kuzinski. I do agree there may be instances where people can't get access to our ordinances. Hopefully it can be resolved in some way. I think our senior center or another, even going to the library and asking them to open the website and pull up the ordinances for the individual would be a way to resolve this, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Derby?
Yeah, just so everybody knows, this is something that we did discuss. And I agree with what Councilor Peak said, and I agree with what Councilor Rist said. It is also like the logistics of getting that copy to the library, whose job is that, every time it gets updated, who's going to bring that update over. So, I think that having access online and having a printed copy at the 50 Payson is adequate for the number of times someone's not going to, in comparison to how many times someone's not going to be able to get 50 Payson or have that internet access, which I think would probably be a relatively rare occurrence.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Peak?
Thank you, Mr. President. One other thing I would just say is I'd be interested to hear, if you would permit, from our city clerk who's here with us about, this has been in our ordinance for a while, that there should be that people should be able to come in and get a copy of the charter or the ordinances. And so I'm curious, how often has that actually happened historically?
How often that happens?
So I'd have to admit, I do not have a full printed copy in my office. If somebody came in and they were interested in a particular section, I would print the section. I can't remember the last time anybody came in and actually asked for a copy of the full ordinance or the charter or the zoning ordinance. I don't have any of them printed anymore. But I'm certainly willing to print copies of a section or if anybody wants it. So.
Thank you. Any other councilor? Councilor Riley?
Separate from this issue, I just wanted to say a thank you to everybody that worked on this project. I know the great lengths that it takes to amend documents, to update language, while keeping the original intent of ordinances intact. It's very tedious work. It's very necessary work. And from the things that I viewed from the edits, everything looks really great. And yeah, so just a lot of respect to the folks that did this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Riley. I have one question. and maybe Councilor Derby answer this. I don't know if it is my English, but can you explain the proposed section 1.4? Because that language to me doesn't make any sense. But maybe you can drive me through it and make a sense to me, because to be honest, to me it doesn't make any sense.
So basically what we did there was we changed it from, and you're gonna have to give me a second here to pull it up in front of me, but we changed it from a positive to a negative, and that change was directly recommended by the ordinance review committee. And so if you give me a quick second, I'll pull it up really quick.
I will give you the second.
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask that one, and I had it up on my other computer, and then I changed in here. So, but I'll be ready in a second here.
Yeah, Councilor Rist.
I just wanted to echo what Councilor Riley said. I wanted to remind everyone that the charter was changed and adopted this past September. In 86B, the word shall was added, which means that on years ending, every 10 years, years ending with the word 5, with the letter number 5, so in 2025, the city council no longer has an option of not reviewing its ordinances. As we have to review the charter every 10 years, we must review our ordinances every 10 years. So I'm hopeful a lot of our membership will still be on the council, but read that, because it means in 2025, there has to be a special committee of residents and councilors to look at every ordinance again. And this will help us understand how hard that is. And I'm very grateful for that, because it gives us a template of how to do it. Because a lot of our ordinances are still antiquated. I mean, some of them deal with agriculture, et cetera. I'm sure you looked at those. But I just wanted to remind our councilors that we have to do it now, every 10 years on the years ending in 5, 25, 35, 45.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Peak.
I'll be here in 85, sure.
Thanks, sir. So I just two things I wanted to say. I'm happy to talk a little bit, since I was on both the ordinance review and through that whole process, the 1.4, I'm happy to talk about that. I also just wanted to say that just as a context for the public, like what we are sending here as a package right here is all of the recommended changes that to us seemed like no-brainers, like they just seemed like very obvious, and there wasn't a whole lot to really deliberate about how to effectively implement it. But I just want to just say for everyone's, for context, that we actually do still have some recommendations from that committee that are not being acted upon here, and that we will have to, go through and actually take a look at and figure out, in sort of a more thorough manner, which of these are things that we can practically address and how to do that and whatnot. So yeah, just throwing that out there.
And so I did find it. So Tom, why don't you, maybe I'll read the two versions and then we can tag team on kind of explaining it, if that works. Omar, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, so what we have currently is section 1.4, which is the issuance of certain licenses and permits. When an ordinance authorizes any act from being performed without the license or permission of a certain officer, board, or committee, such officer, board, or committee shall have the right to issue a license or permit for such act to be performed. So what we proposed, which was recommended by the Ordinance Review Committee, is section 1.4, when an ordinance prohibits any act without the license or permission of a certain officer, the board or committee, such officer, board, or committee shall have the right to issue a license or permit for such act to be performed. And so you can see really the change here is when an ordinance authorizes any act from being performed without the license or permission of a certain officer, and we changed it to when an ordinance prohibits any act without license or permission. And so those are the two different versions. And Tom, if you want to jump in there and help.
Sure.
For context.
So the big thing that was the problem here was the start of this sentence where it says, when an ordinance authorizes any act from being performed without, that just grammatically doesn't make any sense. So it took us a minute to sort of realize what they were trying to say here is just to very explicitly state that in any case that the ordinances say you can't do this without the authority of this department or this committee, that by saying that, we are also saying that that department or committee does have the power to allow people to do that. It seems obvious to me that that's the case, but for whatever reason, when we wrote these ordinances, that felt like something they needed to explicitly put in, but saying like authorizes from doesn't make any sense. So we just tried to keep the spirit of what we think they were trying to say while also making it just grammatically a little bit more coherent.
Example.
Does that answer your question, Mr. President?
Kinda. Can you make an example of it?
I mean, I could probably make an example as well as you could.
So let's
just say, well, yeah, it's actually pretty easy. Let's just say,
maybe we cannot give it a sample in either way. So maybe we should strike the whole thing.
that didn't really come up in our discussions. I think because basically what we wanted to be able to do is to say, if something needs permission from one of the city officers, we want to empower those city officers to be able to say, yes, you can do this. And so I think maybe something that would, not be allowed by ordinance would potentially, I'm trying to think if, like closing off a public way, like a sidewalk, maybe, and having a sidewalk sale. Because in our ordinances, it says that you can't close off a sidewalk, for certain reasons. And so what that would say is, well, it's prohibited by ordinance. So who's in charge of that? It would be maybe the police, maybe the mayor's office, and they would be, after looking at the information, they would be empowered to allow that to happen through a permit. And that might be a bad example because I'm just trying to think off the cuff here. But from my perspective, I think that's the spirit of this, which is to empower departments to be able to issue permits for things that they can issue permits for.
Councilor Rist?
I have an example. You guys can help me and tell me if it's going to work. But one of our ordinances, zoning ordinances, and the building commissioner issued permits. If a zoning ordinance prohibits a certain structure to be constructed on land unless it has a certain setback, that's a prohibition that this section allows the building commissioner to issue a permit for or issue a revision of that particular structure, for instance. We absolutely need this section because the building commissioner needs the authority to do so, and I think it's there. And I think the word prohibit is better word than authorizes, because authorizes confuses maybe the owner of that structure as to, wait a minute, it says to me that I can do this, but when the zoning prohibits you from building next to that lot line, say, the building commissioner is the one to deal with that. So I think that's an example that we've had to deal with our zoning ordinances. Does that work for Tom and Salem? I mean, you guys deal with that all the time.
Before Councilor Councilor Riley?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to kind of explain the language in the most simplistic terms is essentially what this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is giving those licensing agents the waiver authority. So that person is able to look at something at a case-by-case basis and say, yes, in this specific situation, we will allow this. So it's essentially granting waivers for extenuating circumstances, and it allows that person to have the authority to determine when that's valid. Is that correct?
Councilor Peak, Councilor Derby?
I think if a waiver is allowed under the circumstance, then I think that would be correct. I think, the simplest piece of this is it allows, any sort of license to be issued by a city department in which they would normally issue those permits. I think like another example, and I did like Dan's example, and I'll turn it over to Tom real quick, but like burning, burning leaves in your backyard, right? So that is, the fire department would give a license for, or, give permission for someone to do that. So if that was an ordinance, then this would allow them to issue that license to burn, right? So, but I'll turn it over to Tom.
Councilor Peak?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the point of whether or not whether or not this should be just stricken entirely, I do believe that we discussed that briefly in the ordinance review process. And if I recall correctly, the reason we decided not to is that we sort of felt that when folks initially wrote this document, they felt it was important to explicitly state this. There might be like a legal reason why that's true. And so we wanted we thought to rephrase it. In terms of an example, I think that the examples that we had are pretty good, but I think just to simplify it, we say there's a section where it says, I'm paraphrasing, but that you're not able to hold a tag sale unless you get a permit from the city clerk. And what this language says is that with that language, we are also explicitly authorizing the city clerk to issue said permit. Now, you could argue, well, isn't that obvious that they could, because why would you write that language if you weren't implicitly granting them the authority to issue that permit? And I honestly think that that's a fine argument. I don't have the legal reason why they felt it was necessary to explicitly state this. But given that this particular ordinance review largely occurred as a reaction to the events of the summer of 2020 and the murder of George Floyd and the calls from our residents to sort of examine what implicit racism and bias might be in the city, we didn't go too far down this particular road beyond wanting to clarify an obvious grammatical error in this text. Whether or not this language actually has to be there, I don't know, but I hope that the example that I gave clarifies what it is intending to say, is that if you say somewhere, you can't do this without the permission of so-and-so authority, what we are also saying by extension, whether it's written there or not, is that so-and-so authority has the authority to give people permission to do that thing.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kwasinski?
I was just going to say that all the language seems to be the same in both ordinances, the old one and the new one, except for the essential change of authorizes gets turned to prohibits. So I think they say the same thing. I think we've been living with a situation where the language has been in place. I don't see any reason to change that language at this time, except for prohibit, the addition of prohibit and the subtraction of authorized. That's fine. And everything remains the same. And yes, the clerk, in the example of the city clerk, would have the right to issue a permit.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other Councilor? Councilor Sarat?
I think I'm reinforcing what people have already said, but my reading of this is basically this is the foundation for allowing for license granting authority broadly within the city, and it establishes that, and I think this is basically saying what one of the other counselors said, that this establishes that any further subsequent ordinances that talk about license granting authority, that this establishes the basis for it, and allows us to then say further down the road in another ordinance that, in this case, a tag sale license can be issued by the city clerk. Sorry to keep holding you into this. Or burn permits can be issued by the fire department. In order to, it does somewhat seem redundant, but I think you have to establish a foundation basis that you can say in a blanket term that departments, boards, committees can do that. And that's what this core language establishes, I believe.
Councilor Peak?
Thank you. Just to, reiterate what Councilor Zaret said, really the only thing that's going on here, and what Councilor Kwasinski said, like, we're not changing anything about the structure of how this works. What we were doing here is, if you look at the original language, it starts with the sentence, when an ordinance authorizes any act from being performed without the license or permission, blah, blah, blah. And it's clear to me, and I assume to everyone else here, that authorize is not the word that we should be using there, because you don't authorize an event from being performed. You prohibit an event or an act from being performed. And so, and if you read the entire rest of that sentence, it's very clear that the word they meant is prohibit. And I don't know if it was just a typo or what, but it was clear that was confusing to people. What does that even mean? And so really all this is just correcting a grammatical error where there's a word in there where the word that should have been in there is the opposite word. And we managed to clean up the sentence structure a little bit in the process. But that's all that's going on here. In terms of the actual impact on public policy, nothing is changing at all.
Thank you, Councilor Peak. Any other councilors? Councilor Kwasinski?
Number 6.5, the keeping of swine. I presume this is because the state law covers this. Is that the case, or are we really changing something here in the city? Councilor Peak, Councilor Derby, I would ask. Councilor Gomez?
Yeah, Councilor Peak or Councilor Derby?
Yeah, so anything that we are striking, we're striking because it was covered by another set of laws, whether it would be Board of Health regulations, state regulations. So anything that we're striking is taking away redundant things that are no longer enforced or no longer needed.
Thank you. Any other councilors? See.
And Mr. President.
Yeah.
Just one other thing. I just wanted to, so I do want to acknowledge the work that the Ordinance Review Committee did. And I do want to say that, the composition of that committee was diverse. I think it was counselors, people from our community, police officers. It was a joint effort. So all of these things were looked at by many sets of eyes and were reviewed multiple times. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Councilor Derby. Seeing that none of the councilors have any other questions, I will open it to the public. Is anyone from the public that want to participate in this public hearing with any comment or questions? This is the time to participate. I don't see any. So any other councilor have any questions before we make the motions? Seeing none, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just want to check in with the clerk really quick. Is it okay if I read what is listed in the public hearing as the motion, Barbara?
I got it here. Want to take a look?
Yes, I think I would just reference the document that was included in the package.
Okay, I can do that. So I would like to make a motion to change the city ordinance on amendment of chapters 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8, based on the recommendations of the Ordinance Review Committee. The amendments include gender language changes throughout the ordinances, and all of the changes can be viewed at easthampton.gov, government/city council/proposed zoning and city ordinance amendments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the chapter 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8 based on the recommendation of the Ordinance Review Committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye, motion passes.
Thank you.
I will take a motion to close public hearing.
So moved. Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close public hearing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion passes. Correspondent announcements from the President and the Vice President Communication. I do have something for the council. We introduced at the package the 2023 City Council meeting calendar. I hope everybody take a look, and if anyone have any recommendation of or need that we have to move any meetings from any Wednesdays?
I didn't see any.
No. I see none. I will take a motion to approve the 2023 City Council meeting calendar.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the 2023 City Council meeting calendar. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Yes.
Dave Munier.
Motion passes. Councilor Derby, do you have something else?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Report of standing committees, Finance, Councilor Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee will meet next week, December 14th at 5:15. It will be in the conference room, in person,
At what time?
5:15.
5:15.
5:15.
That's for our Counselor Peak, so he can
Okay.
get here from the long trip from UMass. Anyway, we have two items of new business which we will be dealing with, and I'll send you an agenda. That concludes, Mr.
Thank you, Councilor. Public Safety, Councilor Sarek.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met yesterday on the 6th in room 1. It was a hybrid meeting. There was no report from the fire department. We had, most of our meeting was occupied by a great report, as always, by our DPW director, Mr. Nuttleman. We discussed a few kind of salient points of that. The traffic counts at Main and South, unfortunately, were lower than they were in 2017, which throws somewhat of a wrench in the gears of getting a much-needed traffic light or some other form of traffic abatement on that dangerous intersection. But the director stated that there were other options, such as speed monitoring, which I think is what we'll shift to next. I did speak to the police chief today, too, and they are trying to resynthesize some of the accident reports from there. And so I know that there's some counselors who have already been very committed to this issue, and it's definitely something we remain committed to in public safety. They will start taking bids for the Holyoke Street project. There's going to be paving and pedestrian upgrades, including some sidewalks and some side streets there. Those bids will be in the next couple of weeks. There'll be repaving from Cottage to Allen Street. And then we very just briefly, in a non-specific way, talked about the Route 10 corridor, mostly that, again, there's need for DOT to move on that. to pave that street. And obviously, there's significant needs for, again, pedestrian safety upgrades that I think it sounds like some of which will potentially be made, at least either temporarily and then permanently with when the DOT moves on this project. I think he threw out 2025, but don't quote me on that. And then there's also much needed water and sewer infrastructure that needs to be replaced on that stretch too. And I do think that that's in the more near future. Otherwise, pretty much everything else on our agenda was covered within that discussion. I just have some loose ends to tie up with some of our side of the ordinance review report and what we've discussed in public safety. But I just have to have some conversations with the police chief, and I'll be putting forward probably sometime in January a public hearing on those items. There's a few things we'll need to keep in committee still. And I know we typically meet the first Tuesday of every month, but I don't specifically have a meeting yet. One of my colleagues, I want to make sure that we're able to include him in our meetings, so we're going to just go over our schedules and double check, and I'll send out a notice, or I'll hopefully be able to report back at our next meeting. I don't see anything that needs to be extended at this point.
The New City Quick Action, is that done or not done?
It's kind of an ongoing thing, so it just kind of sits there.
Okay.
So it's not really quick actions; it's long-term actions. But I don't think I have anything else now.
Thank you, because I think for clarification,
Because you had
say
dealt
quick
with-
action, so maybe a lot of people will believe that we need to have to do something pretty
Because you
quick.
did
Yeah.
deal with some things already.
Right, but yes, there's a lot of things still
Yep.
that need to be looked at. For
Yeah.
instance, some of the traffic abatement. So anyhow, that concludes.
Thank you. Councilor, appointments, Councilor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. The appointment committee last met on December 1st. There was a great deal of business before the committee. We had 2 appointments and dozens of reappointments. This is a standard practice. At the end of each calendar year, there are large batches of committee members who are up for reappointment. So as the council and public have come to know, I usually use committee report time to discuss the qualifications and merits of each appointee. And as much as I would like to do that tonight, we would quite literally be here for hours because there is a wealth of collective experiences and contributions to our community that could be discussed. Also, the logistics of setting up interviews and having conversations with committee chairs would have taken longer than the 45 days that our city council is allowed to make recommendations for reappointment before our charter rules would automatically approve their reappointment. So instead, with respect for our time tonight, I will make 6 separate motions, 2 for new appointments, 1 for a withdrawn appointment, 1 for reappointments with expiration dates in 2025, and then 1 motion each for reappointments with different expiration dates, if that's agreeable to the council and clerk. Good? Okay. All right, here goes. So first, we have the 2 new appointments that are before us. I would like to move to appoint Hillary Ballantyne to the Nashawanic Pond Committee. And that's in the form of a motion, yeah.
Second.
There was only one appointment?
Different expiration dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a motion and a second to approve 1 new appointment. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Barbara?
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret,
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak.
Motion passes. Councilor Riley?
And then I move to appoint Colleen Del Vecchio to the Public Library Association of Easthampton.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve another appointment, new appointment.
Sorry, just to clarify, that's a term expiration date of December 31st, 2023.
With that expiration term. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Barbara?
Dan Rist,
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye.
JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Riley.
All right, and so then first there was a request from Robert Wild to withdraw his reappointment to the Commission on Disability. So he will not be reappointed, and his term will expire officially on December 31st, 2022. I move to withdraw the reappointment of Robert Wild to the Commission on Disability.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to withdraw the appointment. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez. JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye.
Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rust.
Motion passes.
All right. So now we have a series of reappointments. Each of these individuals and their respective committees, they all have term expiration dates of December 31st, 2025. So I am going to do these all together. So bear with me while I read this into the record. I move to reappoint the following: Shira Simon, Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership; Jana Tetro, Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership; Robert Newton to the Aquifer Protection Committee; Michael Serwick to the Barnes Aquifer Committee; Martha Smith to the Board of Assessors; Thomas Malsbury to the Board of Public Works; Gail Cannon, Charity Funds Committee; Eileen Myers, Charity Funds Committee; Stanley Diamond to the Commission on Disability; Molly Goodwin to the Commission on Disability; Louise Jacob, Council on Aging; Stanley Diamond, Council on Aging; Louise Jacob to the Cultural Council; Jamie Paquette to the Energy Advisory Committee; Scott Kavanaugh to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee; Stephen Donnelly to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee; and Wendy Hammerl to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee; Amy Marsters to the Nashawanek Pond Committee; Beth Tiffany to the Nashawanek Pond Committee; Christopher Cockshaw to the Planning Board; Daniel Hartman to the Planning Board; Anthony Corella to Plumbing and Gas Inspector; and then for Michael Owens to the School Building Committee. That is in the form of a motion.
Second. Sorry.
We have a motion and a second to approve the 23 reappointments. Any further discussion? Councilor Zaret.
I just want to say that it's really wonderful to see not only people engaged in the city in the form of these committees, because that's really a significant part of what keeps the city going, but to see people desiring to continue to be engaged and contribute to the city, that's equally wonderful and heartwarming. I mean, obviously, we want to encourage new people, diversity, et cetera, but it's good to see people who have extended an ongoing commitment. I also just want to clarify, if I may ask the chair a direct question. There were no concerns about any of the applicants, I'm assuming?
No, not at all.
Any other concerns? Barbara?
Connie Denham.
Aye.
Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez. JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Dave Munier. Tom Peak.
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Riley?
All right, and then, so we have 2 reappointments that remain. Now, the reason why these are being done separately is each of these positions have term expiration dates that are unique from the rest of our boards and committees. So the first, for the public record and for everyone to understand, the city attorney must be reappointed at the end of every calendar year. This is standard practice. Every year we have to do this. I will say, just very quickly, The amount of effort and guidance that Mark Tanner has given to the city of Easthampton cannot be stated enough. So I personally am very happy to move to reappoint Mark Tanner, city attorney, with a term expiration date of December 31st, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to reappoint the city solicitor for another year. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez, JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Riss.
Aye.
Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Dunham.
Motion passes. Councilor Riley?
All right, and so the next appointment, this is for the Housing Authority Board of Directors. So the public understands each of these reappointments or appointments are for durations of 5 years. This is a kind of gray area between local and state government. The Housing Authority is a state-run agency, so we have 5 years for these reappointments. So I will say, in the time that I have been collaborating with the Housing Authority and getting to know the folks over there, Ruth Jennison is a valuable voice on the board of directors. And that is also a position that is a resident, whatever, I don't know what the word is that you want to call it, but this specific seat is set aside for residents of a housing authority. So I move to reappoint Ruth Jennison to the Housing Authority with a term expiration date of December 31st, 2027.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the reappointment of Ruth for the Housing Authority for 5 years. Any further discussion? Councilor Peak?
I just wanted to, there is somebody who's there who's a resident. The set aside for Ruth's position is it has to be a union member.
Oh, I apologize. That is correct. One position set aside for residents, one position set aside for union members. Ruth Jennison is a union member appointee. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other Councilor? Seeing none, Barbara? I'm sorry. You want to
Just to speak to, and this kind of goes to something that was said earlier too. I think that during my tenure on the council, I have received many complaints about the Housing Authority, and without getting into that discussion too much, I would say that the Housing Authority only works as well as the board that's guiding it. And this particular member, I wholeheartedly support in terms of what I consider the mission and a just mission for that authority. So I'm in full support of this nomination.
Barbara?
Omar Gomez, JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Riss. Owen Zaret.
Aye.
Connie Dunham. Salem Derby.
Motion
Aye.
passes. Councilor Riley?
Okay, and so then just for the record to reflect, all of these votes were approved 2-0 at our committee. And then our next meeting is scheduled for December 15th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. in Conference Room B, which is in the basement, and thus concludes my report.
Thank you. Ordinance, Councilor Derby?
Thank you, Mr. President. So ordinance did meet on the 22nd of November, and we had a very productive meeting. We were able to get a lot done, and in fact, we were able to get a pretty final version of the vacant storefront ordinance ready to go, pending some language that we talked about at the meeting. So at our next meeting, we will hopefully be approving that. We also had a new order of business, which was to look at the plastics ordinance. As many of you know, there was some concerns around the compostability clause that was in there and made it difficult for some of our local businesses to be able to comply. And, that ordinance is going into effect January. So we did review that. We were able to look at the problematic sections of the ordinance. So at this moment, I would love to set a public hearing for December 21st at 6:15 in the council chambers to discuss the amendments for the plastic ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to set up a public hearing for December 21st at 6:15 in this chamber about the proposed revision to the city ordinance section 621. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Jarrett,
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez.
Aye, motion passes. Councilor Derby?
Thank you, Mr. President. And just for some perspective on that, this was something that was brought to us. We did act quickly, but I just want to let people know that the health agent, who is the enforcement agent for this particular ordinance, sent out an email to all the businesses that were affected and gave them my direct information if they had any concerns above and beyond what we'll be having our public hearing on. And I haven't heard from anybody. So I think we did a good job at, of averting a potential problem. So that will be our public hearing. Our next meeting will be December 12th, which is a Monday, and that will be at 6 p.m. And at that meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the vacant storefront ordinance, hopefully get that to a place where we can move it to the next stage, which would be attorney review and then a public hearing. And we also have another item on our agenda, which is the safe and fair access to legally protected reproductive and gender affirming healthcare services. And so we'll begin discussions on that as well. And thus concludes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just for the record again, and to let the public know, in that meeting, you said that you're gonna start the conversation about Section 623, the safe and fair access to the legally protect reproductive and gender affirming, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Property, Councilor Kuczynski.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is a matter before the Property Committee. However, Planner Bagg has indicated that he may be asking that the matter be retracted and removed because it may no longer be necessary for the council to deal with it. That's on hold for the moment. We'll leave the item on the agenda should that not occur. The reason is that if the city enters into an agreement where we receive money, grant from the state, and there is a provision where the money gets repaid if the property is sold or otherwise disposed of, the council needs to be looking at that matter and be in full agreement with the matter. However, that may not be the case. That may not be the language. We're waiting for final confirmation from the state that that language will not be included. So we're on hold right now.
Thank you, Councilor.
That concludes.
Thank you. Rules, Councilor Rist.
Yes, Mr. President, I haven't spoken. We're going to get a new item on a resolution to discuss, and we will be setting a meeting. I will talk to my colleagues as to when that might be, and probably announce something at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. New business, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. So for new business, we have 2 mayoral appointments, and I would like to make a motion to move the 2 new appointments and the 15 reappointments to the appointment subcommittee or committee.
We have a motion and a second to move the 2 new appointments and 15 reappointments to the appointments committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Dave Munier,
Aye.
Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Jarrett.
Aye.
Connie Denham. Salem Derby.
Aye.
Omar Gomez. JP Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have a proposal to make Easthampton an official, and I'll defer to Councilor Zarrett. Xerxes Society B City?
Yes.
Okay, and I would like to make a motion to move that to Rules Subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the proposal to make Easthampton an official society city to the Rules Committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Owen Zaret,
Aye.
Connie Dunham. Aye. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez, JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier.
Aye. Motion passes. Councilor Derby?
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have a request for immediate consideration, a resolution to pass the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, and I will turn that over to Councilor Denham.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. So President Gomez and I worked on a resolution to pass the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act on Congress, and after deliberating and communicating and discussing this particular issue, Easthampton is a city that is predominantly white, with over 90% of our citizens being white, and this is an opportunity for the leadership of this body to proactively address the historical reality that there are white members of the Pioneer Valley who played a role in the enslavement of Black individuals, and through this process also acknowledging the long and detrimental impacts that experience has had on current residents, both of Easthampton and our neighboring communities. And so as a result of the enslavement of their ancestors, and so we want to actively condemn that particular history, but also use this as an opportunity in terms of both supporting this commission, but also we've been discussing opportunities to create educational opportunities to engage citizens of Easthampton in dialogue about kind of what our history of this community is, and our particular role in the enslavement of Black individuals. And so we have put forth this resolution.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rist?
Just wanted to point out the language that says request for immediate consideration was added at my request because our new charter requires it if a councilor or the president wishes to have this done in one session. It does allow the public to know there will be a vote this evening if no councilor objects. The fact that it's written, that language is there, does not remove a councilor's charter-given right to object to a vote this evening. So I asked the president to make that statement. If no councilor objects, we'll read it tonight, just to make sure to clarify that new language is merely set to be transparent to our public, that we are going to vote on this evening. If you want to come at public speak and speak to it, and it worked, someone spoke to it. So, but that doesn't remove your right to object if you want it to be sent to committee. So I thank you.
Thank you, Councilor, for the clarification. And I will ask now if any councilor have any objection of the council to approve this tonight. Seeing none, I will make a statement before we move it. For the past probably more than 50 years, this nation have been talking about immigrants.
Can you speak up? I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Let's see if I can do it. And I know that's really loud out there. So for the more than 50 years, this country are been talking about immigrants, about the borders, how people are coming to this country legally, some people call it illegally, for any reasons. But you choose to come to this country. These individuals, they didn't choose to come here. There was force. There was sale. There was trade. There was abuse. They abused them. I don't want to be clear. This country abused the African Americans. We do. And it's time to recognize it. It's time to teach the history the way that it is. Because that way we don't repeat it. In my blood, I had 3 different cultures. White from Spain, Taínos, the native from Puerto Rico, and the slave. That's what makes it Puerto Rican. From this group, my dad was not allowed to go to a few places because of color of the skin. And that's the repercussions of what happened with the slave. And we have to be aware of that. This is just one step, but we have to keep moving forward. Any other counselors? Councilor Sarah.
Just that I commend the councilors for bringing this forward. I think one of the heartwarming things since I've been on the council is that we've brought forward so many resolutions in support of social and racial justice, and I think that it's critical that we continue to use our voices as elected officials to speak to these important things. So I applaud both of you for bringing this forward, and I might reach out to you just for clarification to be able to explain exactly to residents what the H40 is, because I want to make sure I can accurately describe it and advocate for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors? Councilor Denham, you want to make a motion and read the resolution?
Yep. So,
Excuse me.
You're not allowed to participate, I'm sorry. Councilor Denham?
read it. An Easthampton City Council resolution to pass the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. Whereas the City Council acknowledges, condemns, and expresses regret for the role past residents throughout the Pioneer Valley played in the enslavement of Black individuals, and recognizes the ongoing detrimental impacts experienced by the Black residents of Easthampton as a result of the enslavement of their ancestors, and whereas the institution of slavery in the Americas was a historical, unique institution of human atrocity, and that the particular experience of Easthampton's Black community cannot be removed from the impact of these horrific particularities. And whereas residents of the city of Easthampton should be made aware of the history of enslaved individuals living in the Pioneer Valley, and we have a responsibility to rectify the lasting impact of this institution on Black people within our community, the Commonwealth, and the country. And whereas H.R. 40 and S. 40, both known as the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, seek to examine the fundamental injustice of slavery perpetuated in the United States for over 200 years until 1865, and consider options for reparations. And whereas the Reparations Commission that the bill seeks to establish would study the history of slavery, the role federal and state governments played in supporting slavery, and racial discrimination against the descendants of enslaved Africans. And whereas the commission would be able to make recommendations regarding compensation and atonement for slavery. This is an essential step in the reconciliation for the criminality of American slavery and better understanding of its lasting effects. And whereas this legislation is already supported by numerous prominent organizations, including Human Rights Watch, the ACLU, Amnesty International, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the NAACP, and American Descendants of Slavery. And whereas racial justice is at the forefront of national conversation, continued actions need to be taken in order for the federal government to begin to make amends for the historic state-sponsored violence against Black people and the decades of systemic racial discrimination that followed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Easthampton City Council recommends that the Congress pass H.R. 40 and S. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, and request our congressional leaders, Representative Richard Neal, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Ed Markey, to support this legislation. Be it further resolved that the city clerk shall cause a copy of this resolution to be sent to Representative Richard Neal, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Ed Markey.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist,
Aye.
Owen Zaret,
Aye.
Connie Denham. Aye. Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez, JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak.
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, I'll turn it over to the Chair of Finance, Councilor Rist.
Thank you. I will make a first reading of an interdepartmental transfer for fiscal year 2023. The request is hereby made for the approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $53,539.59 to be transferred from the PEG Access account, $53,539.59, to be transferred to the PEG Access account, $53,539.59, for the following purpose: to give approval to spend the PEG Access receipts reserved account for cable-related purposes consistent with the franchise agreement. The second item is a supplemental appropriation for fiscal year 2023. Request is hereby made for the approval of the following appropriation: costs associated with the Mountain View grand opening public event. The amount requested is $18,035.60 to be transferred from the cannabis account, $18,035, to be transferred to the Mountain View School grand opening account, $18,035.60. The amount requested will be used for the following purpose: funding for the Mountain View School grand opening on 10/22/22. Mr. President, I move that the aforementioned two items be sent to the Finance Committee for review, and that a public hearing will be set for our next meeting in these chambers at 6:15.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to send this transfer and appropriation to the Finance Committee to set up a public hearing for December 21st, 6:15. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Barbara?
Dan Rist,
Aye.
Owen Zaret,
Aye.
Connie Denham, Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez,
Aye.
JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley.
Aye.
Motion passes. Look like we've done our job today. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Barbara?
Owen Zaret,
Aye.
Connie Denham, Salem Derby,
Aye.
Omar Gomez, JP Kaczynski,
Aye.
Dave Munier, Tom Peak,
Aye.
Brad Riley,
Aye.
Dan Rist.
Aye.
Motion passes. Have a great evening, guys. See you, Salem. See you,
Good night.
Tom. See you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.